Tonight, Michael Horn joins me. He was on last month. We had discussed the Billy Meier material. Michael Horn has been researching the Billy Meier UFO contacts for over 25 years and is now the authorized representative for the book on the Meier case. And he also runs the website And Yet They Fly. Though he has long been fascinated with the amazing photos, films, and other still irreproducible physical evidence, Michael's main focus since 1988 has been on Meier's prophecy, his accurate scientific predictions, and otherwise. We're going to be doing a monthly show. I'm very excited about this, and the reason I asked Michael to come on the show to join me, once a month to go through the specific contact materials because there's so much of it, and it's really quite fascinating. I've been reading through it in preparation for the show. So each month we're going to be picking a particular contact. Tonight we start with contact 251. You can go to theyfly.com/articles/contact_251.htm. The link is right here on Achieve Radio. You can click it, you can print it out, you can follow along, whatever you choose to do. So each month I'll be posting the show material that we'll be discussing for the month, and you guys can go ahead and go through it if you'd like. You can call in with questions. You can send questions in through the InQuick program here on Achieve Radio's homepage. We would be happy to take your calls and questions and go through them with you. There's a lot of material to cover, and I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this evolves. And Michael's here now to go through this and spend the next hour with me and all of you to talk about this incredible material and to go through and really get into the gist of it. So I'm excited, and I hope you are too. So welcome, Michael. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Hillary. Thank you very much for having me on again. I'm going to have to start rereading everything in order to be as caught up as you are, probably.
Well, I'm sitting here going through, this is a very big contact, actually. It's quite fascinating, and I think I've gotten myself into quite an interesting predicament here with having to go through this material. But, Michael, I had such a great conversation with you last time. The energy of the show was really great. We had a lot of positive feedback from listeners regarding the show that we did together. So I'm excited to just have you back on to get into the material, to get in the gist of it. People who are interested in last month's show can go to my archives. They're free. They always will be on Achieve Radio here. And listen in, because he kind of got into some of the, preliminary questions and answers, the Q&A for, the material in itself. But we're going to kind of skip that and just go right into the meat of it and really get into the good stuff. And if we go too fast, or if you think that, maybe we're in over our heads, or you guys just don't quite know what you're listening to, that's okay. Just listen, follow along. You can go back into the archives. You can listen again. You can print out the contact. They're free. They're on Michael's website. You can go in anytime you like. You can follow along online while we're doing the show. Whatever calls to you. My intention with this show is to just have a great, fun conversation about the material and to kind of give it in layman's terms so we can talk about it so that everybody has an opportunity to understand. So thanks, Michael. So where do we start? 251. Want to give kind of an introduction to the contact here and let people know what we're jumping into?
Sure. Contact 251, the greater body of it is information that pertains to a very distant past and the origins of extraterrestrial races as well. And it covers history that we actually, to be just as blunt as can be, have no way at this point of being able to validate or dismiss. It's simply information, I always say, according to the information in the case. And it carries through, we might say, current time and into the future. I think it goes up to year 3999. And what we have here is at first in the contact, some things are, explained back to Meier about the photography, the filming that he's done, and how and why they move their ships in funny ways for those kind of opportunities, how and why a worldwide controversy needed to be provoked for as many people as possible so that those people who were going to start thinking about this would get into it, even if they were getting in, some of them as skeptics or not. So it's a huge contact with tons of information that I certainly haven't memorized. So we'll have to go through it together.
Well, that's what we're doing, and that's the whole point of the show, is to kind of go through the material. I have it printed out right in front of me. I did read it. Again, it is a long piece. It's really fascinating. I have to suggest to everybody listening to go ahead and get online and print yourself a copy and just take it slow and read through it. In the beginning of the contact, and now I'm new to reading through Billy's work. I have not read through it before, having really talked to you, Michael. So this is kind of all new for me, but it's also very fascinating because as a radio host, as somebody who's researched and written for a long time, I have absolutely found little tidbits here and there through the UFO industry and how, people present information, but never have I found something quite so intriguing to the point where it just makes sense. It's a logical type of transcription, and the history that Billy goes into with the genetic manipulations and so on and so forth of the human race is just quite fascinating. And to be honest with you, with every day we see some kind of headline in the news saying that they found something, or they've been able to genetically mutate, or manufacture something here and there that changes humanity or changes disease or whatever, and some of it's used for good and some of it's who knows, but the point is that we have science validating the fact that this art is true, that it's real, it's not some kind of science fiction nonsense. And it's interesting to kind of have that perspective when you're reading this, because if we can do it now, who knows what was really going on billions of years ago, as this material suggests, that we had very conscious and civilized, life on this planet that had come from other star systems, and we're going back to other star systems, and we do that now. We travel to Mars. When we intuitively take a look at this material. I know Billy's material is very linear. It's very mental. Somebody had commented on that Billy usually uses a lot of mental powers, I guess, or some kind of interaction, and I'm very intuitive. Well, I am a woman, so I guess that's appropriate. But when I'm intuitively looking at this material, it just feels true. It feels right. It's almost like stirring ancient cellular memories, and I'm curious if you had that effect when you were first exposed to this material as well.
Well, yeah, you've said quite a lot there, so let me try to, address the components. When you get into the spiritual teaching, we're also going to realize, and read the book, The Might of the Thoughts and the Psyche, you realize how important the what you might call the intuitive is, and the inspired from within. Meier is very balanced. It's just that he knows kind of where to put what when he is presenting information that is basically, as far as they're concerned, scientific and historic. They are not doing, you can detect through your own intuition the rightness of something for your own perceptions, and I can too. One can. But what we're looking at in a document like this is information. And in the Meier case, both Meier and the play Aaron say, we know this, we don't know that, we don't have beliefs about things. It's either to know or not know. And if you don't know, well, we're looking into it to see if we can find out what the truth is about something. So just to round that part of it out a little bit, when you are going to read the, let's say, information in Contact 251, when you're looking at certain things that I call prophetically accurate scientific information, it is straight, as far as they're concerned, factual, just as much as if they're describing, this, mechanism here fits into that one, you turn it on by doing this. So there's nothing right-brained, quote unquote, about it. It's strictly what is. And therefore, it's difficult, in all fairness to people, to try to evaluate the information, strictly speaking, from a left brain perspective, because we don't have the ability to vet it, to know, except, as you were saying, with the information now popping up in our world about genetic manipulation, genetic progress, discoveries, you'll find that this is consistent with the idea, and as expressed by Meier before, our current science has been really bringing up these discoveries and what have you, that genetic engineering, if you want genetic manipulation, is an essential part of our evolution and progress. It's simply that it must be carefully guided and watched like any other development. It's that old phrase about whatever can heal you can hurt you. Science is, too, a double-edged sword, and we can see that. Look at the plague of our world right now, Fukushima, and all that. That's science run amok. So if you get to try to come back to your concept of the intuitive here, if you are sensing on an intuitive level that these things make sense and what have you, and you're able to correlate with the factual developments in the real world, real time, and what have you, then you're putting it together as best you can. And of course, there's things where we can say, I don't know. I just don't know. So let me stop with that before I overtalk this completely.
Well, it's okay to overtalk. You can keep going until you feel it's complete for sure. We want to make sure that we hear you very clearly with what you have to say, because you know this material so well. One of the things that I really liked about this particular contact was where it talked about the genetic manipulation of creating a kind of race or, type of person, people that would be semi-aggressive, or so to speak, because the people, the Pleiadians, had developed to such an extent, evolved to such an extent that they were not able to create war or go into a harmful state of mind. It was completely pure humane. And so this genetic manipulation happened, and it kind of got out of hand, and things took on a life of its own, and life evolved from that point forward. And when I was reading it, it was kind of like, well, that's really what we have to be careful of today, too, with playing God, in the sense of, taking the genetic manipulations to which level? Where do we actually stop? Or where do we push the bar? How far do we go? Those kinds of things. And it seems like, they probably had the same questions at that point, too, or perhaps weren't expecting that, or maybe they were. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let me just first say, what we're referring to here is more to do with the Sirian races and the Sirian star systems, Sirius, Sirian. And these, you described that actually pretty well. These were descendants of the Lyrian, who had become very developed, very progressed quite a bit technologically and even spiritually. However, in some misguided moment, they decided that it wasn't enough to not be aggressive. They wanted to get rid of any trace of that type of energy in themselves, to use that term we use a lot today, to rid themselves of the fighting spirit even. And that's where they got themselves into vast trouble. And that's where people who are, just to generalize here, if you get a little too vegged out, being that is, if you're overly vegetarian and you decide you have to be a super vegan or breatharian, or Aryan or whatever, understand that the balance that we must have inside ourselves, and this was lost on these highly developed people back then, we have to maintain a certain degree of the quote-unquote the negative, or the capacity to fight, which isn't negative in that sense. It's just like we think of any violence or, any kind of form of fight. Oftentimes we view it as abhorrent, when really every form of life has to struggle in some form or another to survive, and sometimes those struggles can be a struggle of life and death. And if one is so pacifistic because they want to be so completely harmless, then they commit a kind of, if you will, a spiritual crime against themselves. They sacrifice themselves and their very valuable life for an incorrect way of thinking. And the Syrians, because they had, taken out of themselves this type of healthy aggression that could be, just in self-defense, fighting spirit, when they started to become prey or attacked by other very overtly hostile races, they quickly realized we made a mistake here. And what they did is they genetically engineered a human race to be willing warriors for themselves. And they made two main modifications to their genetics. They upped their propensity for fighting, for violence and aggression significantly, cranked that puppy up, and they lowered their lifespan down to 100 years or less, because they weren't stupid. They realized that while they were having to rebalance their own races, and it would take time to get this genetic thing straightened out for themselves, they did not want to have a warrior race who, after having served their purposes, said, we don't need these guys we're working for, and to overthrow them. So this is what led this, cause and effect. This is, just about the main operating law of our universe. So it came into great operation here because, first these people become very highly developed technologically and spiritually. They go too far in their concept of what is spiritual. They just want art and beauty and spiritual learning, and let's get rid of any trace of hostility, nastiness. Now they're, victims, if you will. So that's the effect of going too far in that direction. Now they have to rebalance. In the interim, they have to genetically modify a race that'll be rough and ready to go, and let's go do it. And in so doing, then they set in motion also a consequence of, well, when the job is done, we become the next mark. That's not so good. So what happens? That's spiritual heavy breathing from my friends out there. We're now just like the Syrians. Everything's just nice. So what happens is they have a polarized conflict going on in consciousness among themselves as these highly developed Syrians, because a big faction, of their ruling body, however that was, said, hey, we don't need these guys anymore. They're really a bunch of brutes and barbarians. They could be dangerous to us. And the other faction says, well, it ain't very spiritual to just go wiping out a bunch of people either, this is obviously, what have we learned anything? So they were polarized in, do them in, let them be, do them in, let them be. And one night, I think it speaks of one night that these, one faction of these creator overlords took huge numbers, maybe millions of these people in gigantic ships and fled, just got them together and headed away from the Syrian star system as fast as they could. And this set in motion lots of other dramas, some of which we are still today working to overcome, which is, of course, in terms of the genetic manipulation done to our distant forefathers, because some of our distant forefathers were those genetically manipulated peoples who, in this great excursion, this rush through space to get away from those who would, destroy them all, they fled and they managed to get into another part of the galaxy where there was at the end of a spiral arm of the galaxy, there was a solar system with a few habitable planets, and they settled on 3 planets. with these genetically manipulated peoples. Now, it's told in greater detail and much more accurately than I'm doing it, but I'm giving you a kind of an overview so that you understand that this is kind of, in this context, a lot of the premise here. It deals with a lot of this. And what happened was they settled on, as I mentioned, 3 planets in our solar system. One of them has been historically and in myth referred to variously as Phaeton, Molona, Melbeck, etc. And you have the Syrian overlords who set themselves up as the gods of these people as well. It was irresistible, you know. It's like, hey, we've got millions of these people, and it's real nice that we're settling them in somewhere else, but aren't we nifty? So they lorded it over the primitive peoples, and as this contact will tell you, as has been the case many times throughout our very, very long history, peoples who came to this world, extraterrestrial races, lost any knowledge of, any track of the true, what they call Ur history and Ur knowledge, meaning the original, universal knowledge and history connected to them and to their races and to their, real, true origins. And so false histories have been created, false, things that are myths and all. I mean, we think we're stuck in this time, and we are a bit, with the myths and fabulations of our religions, which were also largely due to extraterrestrials that were here lording it over human beings thousands of years ago. But when you go back to this whole thing with Molona, the humans there, remember, these are all very highly aggressive people. They got into developing their technology and what have you, and to wars with each other. And one fine day, they were warring real well, and they, I think they blew off some atomic devices, directed sea waters into magma chambers of volcanoes, blew the place up, and it literally fractured into what we now know as the asteroid belt. So everybody on that planet, if you want to call it Molona, was destroyed. Anybody that was there and that didn't get off, they were destroyed. The second inhabited planet was Mars, which suffered from a cosmic catastrophe when the destroyer planet had taken one of its lovely sojourns through the solar system and made things go topsy-turvy there. Now, the people that could get off of Mars fled here, and we'll talk about reincarnation at some point about where everybody else went. And then the third inhabited planet, of course, was the Earth. So we have, just a story here that, forget Star Wars. When you get into Meier's histories and all the other stuff pertaining to the specific gods of our past connected through these lineages, it's kind of like, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, well, they've done an enormous service because they kind of touched on some of the realities and put them into theatrical terms, but the truth is stranger than fiction.
It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, you read this and you just put everything down and you just start paying attention to it 100%. I mean, I'm going to share this with you, Michael, and also everybody listening. I'm off to Yale University next week I have been given permission to view the Voynich manuscript, which I have been studying for a few months now, and I was introduced to it over the summer. And one of the things about this manuscript, it's written in an unknown language, and it depicts plants and women and some cosmology and a bunch of different illustrations, and it's quite a fascinating piece. One of the things that I have come to understand in studying this manuscript is that to go into the unpolluted mind of a child, where you can look at the pictures and you can know that they mean something. This manuscript's been studied by just about everybody who's in the business on this planet, and they've all agreed that this is an authentic manuscript. It's not a hoax. National Geographic did a piece on it. It's been in circulation for a long time. However, when you go into that intuitive, unpolluted mind of a child, that state of mind, and you look at it and you just let go of everything else, everybody else's theories and all this other stuff, and you just roll with it, it's amazing what comes out. And when I'm looking through Billy's material, I try to go back into that state of mind where I'm not bringing in anybody else's stuff, or, and really it works. I mean, I'm going through it and it works. You read it like a story. It's better than any Star Wars movie I have ever seen. It's really great. I love that you said that, because that's exactly how it feels, like some kind of and it flows and it makes sense, and it's in order, and it's like this man has taken this information and written it down, and you just can't make it up. That's how I look at it. You just cannot sit here and just do pages and pages and pages after pages. I mean, how many books did he do, Michael? How many books total are there of his material?
Well, Billy has written at this point over 50 books. He's well over 26,000 pages total of information and writing and what have you. Again, hand typed out at 60 words per minute or more by one-armed man who also is the source of the most abundant, highest quality, still irreproducible UFO evidence. So, he never contradicts himself. We don't find false information. We don't find hoax stuff. And this is the beauty of going back through the information and showing the new corroborations that keep on popping up. That science said, new discoveries, and then we go, well, Meier wrote that. Those details, sometimes the same words, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more years ago specifically. And this is part of the headache of trying to bring this work out into the world, where people are so bombarded by illusion, fantasy, science fiction, irrelevancy, and entertainment, that something that is so monumental, it will pass by too many people. There are too few. People are going to say, well, wait a minute, run that by me again? What are you talking about? So this is indeed the challenge, if you will. This is the challenge of the Meier case. What are you going to do with something this huge, except to try to go to what's the point of it? And there's a reason they're trying to assist us, because, as you hinted at before, the Plejaren themselves, their ancestors, the Illyrians, all these people, they've been historically through the grief of these atomic ages and all this other stuff. Just to dip off for a second, as we're beginning to find out how unimaginably catastrophic Fukushima is and will be for generations to come, we have to note that back as far as 58, 64, Meier is warning atomic power plants, stop. This will be a catastrophe. The Plejaren told him that on one of their worlds, sometime long ago, they've long since surpassed this, but they lost 48 million people because of accidents to what was their version of atomic plants. We don't even consider that meteorites, little things striking, all they have to do is penetrate parts of these nuclear plants, and you've got massive problems. This happened to the Plejaren. And we don't have to even worry about extraterrestrials. Meier was told within days of the Fukushima disaster, this is an ultra worst possible case scenario. Now, it is already. New particles have already been detected by the Plejaren within a week of that disaster in Europe, Central Europe, Northern Europe. This stuff has killed, right now, folks, get off of sushi. It just isn't, we're now seeing things, if we can grasp this, we are getting histories of our ancestors and forefathers about whom we otherwise know nothing. So there's a reason for it.
Well, the indigenous that I work with talk about plate tectonics on the planet and how they have shifted over the billions of years, and how the maps and things that their ancestors have kept track of show this, and the fact that we're not done, it's still going to shift and change and move. And when these power plants are on fault lines or near fault lines, or even not near fault lines, and we have some kind of major plate shift, we're looking at some, exactly what you just talked about. So it doesn't seem that people who are in position to put these kinds of things into effect really take into account the long-term effects. It always seems to be based on profit, short-term success, political, industrial type agendas and so on and so forth. They haven't really moved into that higher state of consciousness yet. We're taking from the earth and depleting resources really is a factor in humanity's survival. The planet will be fine. The planet will be moving on and doing its own thing unless, of course, we destroy it, like by infusing the magna with seawater and going into these idiotic type things where we just don't think about the consequences, or we have capabilities to move off planet, which, by the way, we do. NASA has privatized. We have all these companies doing private loads to Mars. Nobody knows what's being transported up there. There's rumors that they're building colonies up there, that they're already making plans to move people off planet. Why? I mean, who's got the inside scoop? When you think about it, we have to remember, I think, really important that we remember as human species on this planet, all of us together, that we are not invincible. We're not immortal in the sense of our bodies. I mean, we may be spirits who go on and reincarnate in other places, yes, but in the meantime, what are we teaching the generations to come up behind us? I mean, how are we really standing up and being examples for higher living? And I liked what you talked about earlier, Michael, and I just want to go back to this for just a second, because so many people have talked about this incessant need to just be all spiritual and be let go of all the warriorness inside of you. And what that does is leave us, in some senses, very vulnerable to other species or other people who are not. And so if that had never been the case, they would not have had to create, by genetic mutation, manipulation, another species to protect them. I mean, we have to remember how to be responsible and accountable with that side of ourselves that can bring it to the table and protect ourselves when we have to, right?
Well, yeah, and you don't even have to, yet take it to the point of the extraterrestrials. Let's address a lot of what you said, if possible. I doubt that we really are yet moving anything to Mars, to be honest with you. But remember, wherever you go, there you are. And unless we learn our lessons here, and unless we correct the imbalances in our consciousness and address rectifying the damage to the planet over time, because it's going to take a lot of time, to go somewhere else is to just go and, bring our bad manners elsewhere and do the same thing over. We don't yet have to worry so much about a threat from space, because the greatest threat we face is from ourselves. And the violence, nowadays, people have to be aware that this is a turning of the age, so to speak. And during this time, we get the intensification of the darkness along with the dawning of the light. And as the old dies out, it generally goes kicking and screaming. So, we can see the polarization, the effect of it. And remember, Meier, as far back as 81 and 87, predicted 2 U.S. civil wars coming to our world. And just a few months ago, he was told by the Plejaren that a high probability exists that by 2020, the U.S. is in anarchy. Can we figure that? And these civil wars, according to Meier, would end up breaking up the country into 5 territories, each under some form of dictatorial sectarian rule. Look out. So we can see now movements, I think parts of Colorado, different places where people are talking about seceding and all the rest of it. I'm not putting any judgment of mine on good, bad, or indifferent. I simply say we are seeing the fulfillment of these prophecies because cause and effect is at play. We're polarized like crazy. And when we bring it to the place of putting it in perspective of the genetically manipulated peoples and all that, not when, but as our scientists, because they are working on rectifying the aging gene and, they will have to rectify the aggression gene, we will ultimately get things straightened out, but in the process we're going to create more problems too, because if we have an extension of life through the aging gene and we are very overpopulated, that means that people live longer and longer and we keep breeding people. It means for a while we have more war and strife because we're competing for ever-dwindling resources. So if you can see this puzzle that we're partaking of, and also, just before I shut up again, it's like when we talk about overpopulation, we're not talking about the evil elite trying to wipe everybody out, folks. We're talking about we have caused our own strife and planetary environmental degradation by irresponsibly overbreeding ourselves, domestic animals, and you name it. This is a finite closed system. And if we want to have peace and a little joy and the rest of it, we've got to give ourselves room to breathe so we're not on top of each other, so to speak. So, enough of that. Hillary, take it away.
Well, you're talking about an interesting scenario that was recently depicted in the movie Elysium, where the elite or the people who had this technology to live longer and the ability to heal any ailments and the technology, and they lived in kind of a Garden of Eden, if you will, out in space above the planet, while everybody else on the planet had little, if any, access to that kind of lifestyle, and there was overpopulation, dwindling of resources. So everything you just described was very interestingly enough depicted in that movie. So we have it. We have the capability to foresee the vision of this. What I want to do is go back to the Billy Meier material and kind of look at this. And what I'm really liking and finding very interesting on a personal level as well is that reading this and then looking at where we are today with the discoveries, with the advancements, with the studies, with how we are as a culture in 2013 right now. A lot of this is actually, he did foretell it. He did talk about it. He did write it out. And I've only gone through a very short amount of the material, so I certainly have not gone through all 50 books. And speaking of his books, are they available for purchase without spending a lot of money? Because when I researched it online, it seemed like they were all very, very expensive. Is that just because of the rarity of them? Can you give us any suggestions on where to find it, or is all the material basically in the contacts that you list on your website for free?
Well, here's the answer to that. Most of Meier's books are still only available in German. There are 2 new English language books. I mentioned The Might of the Thoughts and the Psyche. The Might of the Thoughts is so profound. I've just done my second read of it. I figure I'll really be cooking after about 4 or 5 reads of it. It is just brilliant of how the mind works, how thoughts work, how the conscious and unconscious mind are affected. I mean, things that our psychiatrists and psychologists don't even know about. And it's profound stuff. Now, for the kind of stuff that people rub their hands together, or I want to know about this prophetic information and all the stuff he was told, that's available pretty much for free. And you can get it through my website, and websites linked through mine. There's one called futureofmankind.co.uk, and they have all of the contacts that have been put into approved English translations are there. And, this is why we say you can learn so much. Look, before the show's over, I want to make my offer to your listeners again because it went over well last time, and I'll do it again. for a DVD, but I don't mind telling you at all that, like Contact 251 and so many contacts, so much of the spiritual teaching articles on that are available. And this is because it's meant to be given to the people of Earth. But there are things, of course, Meier, writes books. They are then published in very beautifully done, very well-made, Swiss publishing books. Nothing cheap about them, and so they themselves are pricey. Probably not all that much more pricey than other books, but the books that I sell through my website, I'm burdened by the import and export costs of the books and bank fees to pay to Switzerland. And so a book that, I would love to be able to sell for $45, 400-plus page book called The Might of the Thoughts, I have to sell for over $60 because of those additional fees. And Switzerland is powerless to do anything about making the book available for less either, because, again, all this chain of publishing and all. So, but a book like The Might of the Thoughts is so valuable that you will read and read and read and reread and go back and try to understand, oh, that's what it means. Not that it's complicated to read, it's just that it presents so much so clearly that in many ways it's just either foreign, slightly unknown to us. We never thought about it that way. And the effect it has on thinking, and of course, by virtue of the title, The Might of the Thoughts, Meier is telling us it is through our thinking, knowing how to really think, that we will work our way out of the hole we still are digging our way into. But those of us that want to get out, we don't have to waste our time screaming about the, Illuminati or whatever. Let's get our brains working, because the so-called evil elite, whoever they may be, they don't have any trouble organizing their thoughts and going for what they want. And when we realize the might of the thoughts, the secret science that has been kept from us by the religions, by governments and false leaders, we'll get going here. So, yeah, there's books available, and a book like, And Still They Fly, we have it as an eBook now. I've got a limited number of hard copies left. These things disappear pretty quickly, so yes.
Yes, great. Well, I'm actually looking at your website. I think this is your website. It said Might of the Thoughts. It's sold out. Towardthetruth.org. I believe I was clicking on this through your website. Do you expect...
That's a different website. But
that's a different website.
Yeah, and they're sold out, and they don't carry it as regularly as I do, and yet I can get sold out pretty quickly too, because I have to order in relatively small lots because of the expense. But I order them all the time, and it just generally takes a few weeks. That's the other problem, 3 to 4 week shipping. But my website is simply theyfly.com. Theyfly.com. And if you go there, you'll see The Might of the Thoughts up there in the right-hand corner, and there's a product page. And what I just wanted, since we're doing it, let me just tell your audience, I talked about all the prophetically accurate scientific information, and in our film that we show the cover of called As the Time Fulfills, we put in over 50 specific, scientifically corroborated, accurate pieces of information from Meier that he published verifiably before our so-called official discoveries. And this film, it's a DVD. It's also available as a download, but if you get the DVD and just mention the word Hillary, I send you a complete, free, full-length, additional DVD. So you get 2 for the price of 1, and you will have so much Meier material, because in both films you get to hear Meier himself talking about stuff. In some cases he's talking about stuff that only occurred after the film came out, So for those of you that want that, it's a freebie, and you can thank Hillary for making this opportunity available. I want to do something for that. And, of course, there's just tons of free stuff. Just read to your heart's content on the sites.
Excellent. So you guys, you hear that? Do it. One of the things that I kind of jumped off the page is that when I was reviewing Contact 251 was the fact that Ta is talking to Billy, and he talks, this entity talks about leaving Earth, that they have all left, that all the stations are gone. Is that something that happens with everybody that contacts him? Is it? Can you talk a little bit about that? The fact that they have left. This was I believe 1995, and
right.
The contact was saying
what
that.
happened is, for a very long time, the player, and hundreds, at least maybe going back thousands, had bases here inaccessible to Earth humanity, very well concealed, and once they left, they were filled in, closed up. We'll never find any trace of them. When this phase of this mission was over, they no longer had need of their bases. And because they have the technology, obviously the visibility whenever they want and virtually instantaneously now, they didn't need the bases, which were also used for monitoring many things on Earth. And they had crews of people who had different tasks in terms of keeping their eyes on certain things, and to have them on the planet was useful, obviously. Once that was no longer necessary, they officially withdrew from those bases, and so their visits to Meier are done on as needed basis or as desired. They still have their telemeter or telemeter discs circling the Earth, monitoring everything. That's what visited me in Brazil in 2011, within about 20 feet of me, one of their small telemeter discs. And at some point, maybe I'll put up the photograph taken by someone else in Switzerland years ago in daylight of these small discs that glow, even in broad daylight, they glow quite brightly. And those are unmanned, of course, they're very small, but they have all sorts of monitoring functions, and their technology is extremely high. It's far beyond ours. But we should also know, just as a side note, you need to know that our intelligence services, secret government, CIA, has technology, and they've had it for decades, that is enormously developed. They've had laptop computers since 1990, 91 or before. They've had, since that time, satellites that can come down and, count the hairs on your head just about literally, photographically. The secret military stuff has existed, and it's kind of parsed out when we get new technology into our commercial world. That stuff has already existed with the black projects for a long time. They have some anti-gravity craft. Most sightings, but not all, are secret military. These so-called abductions, same thing. So there's always this kind of thing, and Meier is not really allowed to say too much about it because it's very terrestrial. It's our things here, and they're not trying to get into overtly calling out too many specifics, except to say, they just simply said, your CIA possesses technology and weaponry your armed forces would envy. So all of these things are just, swirling around in my mind as part of this whole thing, this whole drama.
This surely must have taken over your life, Michael. Did you realize what you were getting into when you decided to stand up for Billy and be his spokesperson?
Well, I didn't realize what I was getting into when I first found the material, except it really resonated. When I decided I wanted to be his spokesperson officially, I had already decided to stand up for him in the material several years earlier by challenging the skeptics who were always attacking him. I didn't realize, in direct response, I didn't realize quite the magnitude that this would take on, and, just how much, looking at the world taking on people who are skeptics and pseudoscientists, even if they have degrees, because they don't want to know. They come to try to disprove. They approach, this has got to be a hoax and I'm going to prove it is, rather than what is this and how can we determine if it's this or in a scientific way. I did not know it would be this much to do, and I'm kind of glad that I can do something with my time and energy at this stage of my life. It's been half my life. I mean, it's 35 years actually since I first walked into that bookstore and becoming familiar with the Meier case. That's 35 years ago. And being, it's like a blink of an eye. And now, wow, this is half my life. And I've had many of the things that I've done in my life and can do, but this was so much calling the thing. And I felt I've got to turn my attention as much as I can to this. So, yeah.
Do you find now when you talk to people or when you're interacting with people that you are doing more defending about the material, or do you find that people have moved on into a kind of acceptance and they're more interested in talking about the prophecies and the material itself?
Well, the people that I tend to come into contact with, so to speak, if you have any connection, are already much more on board with, well, okay, we know this is real. What about this? What about that? Tell me more, or how do I find out? When when I'm kind of traveling around or just in circulation, or I go online or whatever, I will encounter people who know nothing about this, and it's kind of fun for me to always try to figure out, how do I introduce this to people? Because, someone will say, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm involved with something very unusual. Are you sure you want to know? And well, tell me. I said, okay, well, you don't have to, there's nothing here to believe, but let me, and so depending on the person, I always look to find some kind of a way to come into explaining a little bit and saying, well, this is, and again, you may or may not think this is real, but if you have any questions, I'm glad to try to answer them. And I'm surprised that more and more people actually now are going, oh, that's interesting. I don't know when they actually follow up completely, but there's less initial, putting, hanging garlic around their necks when I'm around. So they seem to be able to handle there's something really? Okay, well, I'll look at it. It's a lot different than what I encountered in the earlier years, among the people who were not anywhere near knowledgeable about this field.
Yeah, in 251, Billy talks about this with Patan and how, he was very important in the coming out of this topic, and how people, of course, will go with it in whatever direction they want to go to, and some people will make things up and they will go on. But he was still very instrumental in bringing the topic to the table and leaving it there for people to, go through and just accept or reject in whatever way they did. So how do you see yourself in this at this point? I mean, for me, I would imagine that the Pleiadians had this in their minds when they saw Billy working, that you would eventually come out onto the world stage as well. Don't you think that this was some kind of divine hand in it, that they are watching and that they know that you're doing this?
Well, I don't know about divine hand. I mean, they know I'm doing it. They sent me information, specific information, through Billy. Getting stuck in a big mess that would have actually harmed all of the work in this, and they recommended, they told me what was actually going on that neither Billy nor I knew about, and they've commented on in some of the transcripts, and that's nice. I mean, you don't do it for the sake of people going, oh, nice boy, pat, pat, pat. It's kind of like, oh, okay, glad you noticed. Because the guy that represented this before me got himself in real hot water by really going far afield and taking a lot of liberty with the material, I decided when I started to do my own version of this, even before it was officially from Meier, that I would, and then certainly once I got their agreement, I would let them know virtually everything I did so that I didn't get far afield with something if it wasn't accurate. I'm entitled to my own opinions. I'm not paid by them, all that stuff. So, and there's stuff I go, I don't know if it's true or not. Do I contact 251? It's fantastic. history, and there's stuff in there that's we can see has come true, and the genetic engineering of meat, we're now doing that. Meier's writing about it, almost 20 years ago. Well, lots of stuff. So somebody said, well, if you have to say true or false, I say, well, of course it's true to me, and I've proved enough of it, but can I prove everything in the same way? No, because so much still is the distant past or the unrealized future. So are there things that I disagree with? Yeah, well, I just have to say, I don't know that their explanation of crop circles and chemtrails is correct. I don't know. It's controversial. It's different than my own take on it that I formulated some years ago, and I kind of like that. I like not having to say, oh, I agree with everything in this case, because, you have to think for yourself. And Billy is such a non-invasive, non-inflictive person and personality. He's very neutral, and he never doesn't tell you what you're supposed to think or do or behave or believe in. He's a human being. He's busy making his own mistakes.
Yeah. Well, you've made that clear. We are unfortunately out of time. The hour has gone by so fast. I want to thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to doing this again next month as your schedule allows. I hope everybody who's listened has enjoyed themselves. I will post the next contact once Michael and I decide which one we would like to explore on air. And thanks again for being here. Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you very much.